Welcome to Love and Money with Barbara Treadwell, where we explore the deep connection between our money and the people we love. Hello, it's Love and Money with Barbara Treadwell, and today we have a wonderful guest, Jason Slone, or Dr. J, as his clients call him. He's a wealth advisor and head of college planning at Etch Financial, which is a fiduciary financial planning firm, and they specialize in college student loans and retirement planning. He has a PhD in comparative religion, has taught college at the college level for 25 years, and has served as a dean for 7 years. He has a new book out, Too Rich for Aid, Too Poor to Pay, and it's reached the #1 spot on Amazon for books on financial aid. He lives in Savannah, Georgia, with his wife and 3 children, 2 of whom are in college. And he says that all 3 of them are going to graduate debt-free. So I have a special interest in this because I put my daughter through college 100 years ago and am currently putting 2 grandchildren through school in Manhattan. So I read the book with great interest. It's wonderful. It's short. It's smart. It's easy to follow. It has great advice. And if you have more questions, you can get in touch with Jason. So welcome. And I'm going to start off with the toughest question.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this.
This is me too. This is it. So what are the biggest challenges that parents face who are putting their kids through college today?
Yeah, that is a good question. So it's very different from when I went to college. It's a totally different space now. College is more competitive and costly than ever. And so a lot of parents who have college-bound kids right now had kids later in life themselves. They went to college, maybe graduate school or medical school, some law school. And so they had kids in their, late 20s, early 30s. And so they're now sending kids to college in their 40s and 50s and sometimes even 60s. And so it's, they're squeezed. The old saying is they're in the sandwich generation because they maybe have aging parents that they're caring for. The cost of living has increased. They're trying to save for retirement, trying to pay off the mortgage, and here comes college. And oh my goodness, it snuck up on us. We have 3 kids and wait a minute. How is college $100,000 a year now, or in many cases, and even if it's, a more affordable option, the more affordable options are still $40,000 a year in some cases, depending on your state. That's several $100,000 if you got a couple of kids. It's just like, how do you make it all work? And then there's the emotional side of it, which is, there are kids. We want to give them the world. We want to give them the best of everything. And, kids fall in love with dream schools. And, you don't want to crush your kids' dreams, but gee whiz, do we really want to spend $400,000, on Duke or Emory or Vanderbilt or something like that, even though it's my kid's dream? How are we going to make it all work? And so unfortunately, to me, the most frustrating thing about college planning these days is that it's gone from being an exciting part of life, an exciting stage of life, a joyful time in life, to a very stressful time in life. This sending your kids to college should be fun and exciting and amazing. And it's just because the cost is so crazy high these days, it's become a source of stress for parents. And so all of that combined, I think, is what's going on with sending kids to college these days.
That's a lot. And I think that you said it very eloquently. People are surprised. They're caught. It's nothing like when we went to school. Or our children went to school. It's very, very different now.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit
for
about
sure.
those Ivy League schools. It's about $125,000 a year now, which brings
Yeah.
up to $500 for 4 years. I'm a financial advisor too.
Yeah. Oh goodness, yeah. So I was actually the Harding professor at Dartmouth. So I spent some time at in the Ivies, and I have friends who teach in the Ivies, and I know I have friends whose kids go there, and I have clients whose kids have gone there, and I have a lot of jokes to say about the Ivy Leagues, and partly it's because I'm a blue collar kid. I've come from a blue collar background, and And so maybe I have a little, something on my shoulder about these Ivy League colleges. But I always say that, kids who graduate from Ivy League universities do very well in life. There is no doubt about it. They are successful. They get jobs in the best consulting firms and Wall Street and best med schools and all that kind of stuff. But it's a bit of an illusion. Those kids are going to be successful in life because of who they are, not what happens to them while they're at that college. In other words, it's a selection bias, and to nerd out here. In other words, if you're the kind of kid who can get into Harvard or Dartmouth or Brown or Princeton or whatever, you're going to be successful no matter where you go to college. Okay. There's nothing truly magical that happens at those schools, maybe other than there's some research which suggests the amount of peer pressure Ivy League kids are under from their other classmates maybe motivates them to study a little bit more. But I can tell you from firsthand experience, you're not going organic chemistry at Yale is the organic chemistry at UGA or Georgia Tech, right? It's the same textbook, it's the same lab, it's the same content. And the professors, 80% of professors in the United States come from the same 20% of schools. And so the professors at, Georgia Southern University here in Savannah are just as good as the professors at UGA, who are just as good as the professors at Georgia Tech, who are just as good as the professors at Harvard. And you can't convince me otherwise. So all the research shows, again, it's not where you go, it's who you are that matters most. In fact, there's a wonderful book on the admissions side of college planning called Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. And it's chock full of empirical research and data on this. So I always tell families, here's how you here's a hack on how to get the benefits of Ivy League education at a fraction of the cost. Here's my trick. And I talk about this in the book. So study really hard, get really good grades, really good SAT scores, apply to all the Ivies, get admitted to one of them or two of them, and then save your admissions letter, and then go somewhere more affordable. And then for every job application for the rest of your life, the cover letter should say, I was smart enough to get in and smart enough not to go there and overpay.
That's good. That's a good hack. That's really wonderful. It's wonderful because you're right. Characterologically, the makeup of that person and their experience and their take on life is what gets them far, and not necessarily where you went to school.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very good. So thank you for that. What common mistakes do you see families making while they're putting their kids through college?
Yeah. So there are a few that I see quite often. One is probably the biggest is they just don't make a budget. Whenever we make an investment or a large purchase, you start with a budget. If you're going to buy a home, like, well, how much can we afford? Our budget's $500,000 or whatever. Then you go shopping. Or we have to buy a vehicle for our 16-year-old kid. Well, what's our budget? Well, $25K. Okay, now go shopping. But when it comes to college, I see parents doing the opposite. They tell the kid, go explore. And inevitably, the kid falls in love with the most expensive schools because of prestige and peer pressure and TikTok and slick marketing by those very expensive schools. And then the parents are stuck. They're like, oh, gee whiz, wait a minute. We can't afford. I just talked to a mom this week. This happened to her. She reached out. She's like, we made a big mistake. We went on vacation in North Carolina. I was like, oh, we were close. Let's go visit Duke. And of course, the daughter fell in love and was like, Mom, I have to go here. It's my dream school. And now the mom's like, there's no way we can afford $100,000 a year. We have 5 kids. Now I don't know what to do. So, if you can start with a budget and then let your kids go shopping, and say, look, this is how much we can afford, find schools in this budget. You're going to save yourself a lot of headache and heartache down the road. So that's a big mistake. Another big mistake I see families make is thinking they make too much money to get any financial aid, right? They think, we're not going to get any financial aid. What's the point, of even filing the FAFSA or filing the CSS profile or anything like that? And that's a big mistake because you don't know if you're going to qualify for financial aid or not. It's a complicated formula. It all depends on the school. Every school uses the information a little bit differently. But also, even if you are, super high income or high asset family and you don't qualify for need-based financial aid, it doesn't mean your kid won't get merit-based financial aid, like scholarships. And at most schools these days, if your kid is going to get a scholarship, they're going to require you to file for financial aid because they count scholarships as financial aid. And a lot of parents don't understand that scholarships are financial aid. And if you don't apply for financial aid, you could be leaving money on the table that your kid could have gotten had you just simply taken the time to file the FAFSA and file the CSS profile. Yeah.
That's illuminating information and material in many different directions. I think I heard you on another podcast. I don't think this is in the book, but you talked about how you worked out a budget with your kids and you kind of bribed them, for lack of a better word, or guided them, I'll put it that way, towards a school that was in state and would give them just as good an education as some other schools. So would you take us through that? It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, Barbara, you're a financial planner. Like half of this job is behavioral coaching, right? It's psychology. It's not just finance, it's psychology. So I use some psychology on my own kids. Yeah. So I actually got interested in this niche of college financial planning because of my own kids. So my oldest is going to be a senior in college. And when he was 9th, 10th grade, he was a football player. And he was like, oh, Dad, I'm going to play college football. Well, I knew he wasn't good enough to go get a full ride football scholarship at UGA or something like that, right? So I said, well, look, you're probably D3 material, and that means these small liberal arts colleges, which is what I attended as an undergrad student, which are great schools, but you're not going to get an athletic scholarship, right? So I said, what kind, what are you thinking? He said, well, I want to do this, whatever. And I said, okay, bud, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a little budget exercise. I said, here's what we've got saved for you. We're very fortunate that grandparents chipped in and helped out. And so we had a budget. And I said, this is the budget. And if you stay in the state of Georgia, you'll graduate debt-free. If you leave the state of Georgia and you go somewhere else, there's probably going to be loans involved because it's going to be more than the budget. I'm not taking loans for you because a lot of reasons, but I said, look, you're just going to go play football for fun. And I'm not going to put my own retirement at risk so you can have fun playing football when there's perfectly good educational option, in this state here. So let's do some math. So we started looking at the tuition and how much he would have to take out in loans and what his loan payment would be after college, how much his take home would be. We modeled out a couple different career scenarios. Well, if he was wanting to be a teacher and a coach, he might make, 60 grand coming out. Your take home pay is going to be X. Your student loan payment would be Y. Your leftovers this much. Where, if you stay in state and you graduate debt free and you have this kind of salary, there's no loan payment. This is how much you have left over every month. And I said, so I want you to think about this. When you're out of college, do you want to have enough money to play golf and fish all the time? Or do you want to be writing a check to a bank and the government every month and not being able to play golf and fish? What would you like to do? It's up to you. And he thought about it for a while. And after a while he came back and said, Dad, I think I'd rather graduate debt free and play golf and fish.
Very smart kid. You raised a good one. That's a great lesson. That's a great lesson.
Yeah.
It just teaches he had to figure it out for himself. And that's invaluable. Much better than you telling it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Honestly, I have that conversation with a lot of my parents who are clients. They're like, I don't know how to get through to my kid. They got their sights set on Tulane or whatever. It's funny to me how kids land on a dream school. I'm thinking, you've been to that campus once or maybe never, and you have to go there. It's your dream school. I mean, how does this happen? But nonetheless, it happens all the time. And parents are like, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, well, do math with them and let them make the choice.
Yeah.
A lot of times the light bulb will go off. And the other thing I say is pray they don't get in. Maybe you'll get lucky and they won't get admitted.
Except then they wouldn't have that great admission letter to be able to
Yeah, that's true.
take on job interviews with. I love that strategy. It's great. It's just great. You've got a lot of golden nuggets in the book
Oh,
and
thank
in
you.
your experience. So, what's the number one tip that you can give for parents with college bound students? What's number one?
Don't believe the hype. That's my number one tip. I tell parents this all the time. Don't believe the hype. Okay. A college degree these days is a commodity. And not to use nerdy words, but a commodity means they're basically all the same. A bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree is a bachelor's degree. And the U.S. News and World Report rankings, look, I was a dean. I'll tell you, I'll spill the beans. Everybody cooks the books to get higher on those rankings. And I'll give you one specific example of one way it's done. Over the past 5 years or so, they stopped requiring SAT and ACT admissions scores, SATs and ACT scores for admissions, right? They went test optional. Well, the dirty little secret behind that, and ask me how I know, because I'm friends with a lot of enrollment management people, is that did two things. One is it drove up the number of applications, because now if you don't have to submit a test score, hey, why not throw your, take a shot at Harvard, take a shot at Dartmouth, because I don't have to report my test scores. Then the other thing that happened, so the amount of applicants went way, 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 way up, but for the same number of students. So their selectivity went way up because their acceptance rate dropped. So if you had 30,000 applicants for 5,000 seats, and then you go to 60,000 applicants for 5,000 seats, you cut your admit rate in half, you look way more prestigious. It was a scam. And then the second thing happened is the only kids who did submit test scores were the top of the top. So now they can advertise our average SAT score is 15, whatever, right? So they look even better. So they're cooking the books all the time this way. What's happening in the classroom is very different. It's not like you're getting this amazing $100,000 worth a year of education at NYU or University of Miami or BU or BC. Your kids are basically getting the same education as they would get at Georgia Southern University. And this is not to tell parents what to do or where to send their kids, but just know with clarity, eyes wide open, that you are not paying for a better education. You're paying for prestige and you're paying for a brand. And if you can afford it, hey, go for it. If this is your life value, you want to give your kids go for it. But if you're like a lot of parents that I work with who the jargon in financial planning is mass affluent, meaning you've made enough money that you're comfortable, but you don't have enough that you can write comfortably a $400,000 check for college. If you're in that space, you probably want to pay attention to costs, right? And you don't have to send your kid to a very, 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 very expensive, overpriced, in my opinion, college to set them up for success. Okay. I just wish parents would know they could relieve themselves of that pressure. Like if I don't send my kid to the most expensive school, they're going to be a failure and I'm a failure because I didn't have enough saved and gee whiz, I should have saved more. I'm a bad parent. No, you're not a bad parent. It's just that the costs have gotten crazy and they've gotten crazy strategically. This is the other thing to spill the beans, is colleges have been raising prices on purpose. I actually have a new article coming out where I talk about this. It's in finance called the Chivas Regal effect, which is that people confuse price with quality. And there are a lot of consulting firms that are advising college presidents, well, if you want to look more prestigious, raise your prices. Now, look, they raised their prices. We got to raise ours even more to keep up. And it's perverse incentives to where these colleges are overcharging on purpose to make themselves look better and look more prestigious. By the way, it's called the Chivas Regal effect for listeners out there. If you don't know this story, Chivas Regal was this, for a long time, this kind of middle of the road whiskey in terms of quality. And they just suddenly raised their prices. And then everybody started thinking of them as like top shelf whiskey because they were so expensive. It's a marketing trick. And colleges do that on purpose. They raise their prices to look prestigious. And I just hate that parents are, I hate to say falling for it because it makes it sound, like they're doing something wrong and they're not. It's just that the prestige and the rankings and the pricing and all that is just out of whack. And you don't have to send your kids to, you don't have to spend that much on college. Your kids are going to be fine. They can get a great education in lots of different places. What's more important than anything, more important than prestige and rankings, is fit. That is, where is your kid going to be happy and thrive and find their tribe and their vibe, as the kids say today, find the right vibe. Because if your kid's happy and their mental health is in good shape, they're more likely to go to class and study and do well. And that's what sets them up for success, because they're learning and developing skills. It's not the price tag.
That pricing strategy is across Scotch whiskey, clothing, automobiles. I mean, you can find that example anywhere. You mentioned the fit, and you also talked in your book about the four financial fit. Where do you fall? Where can you tell your listeners today where they fall in those four categories?
Yeah. That's a really important thing that I use as a financial planner when I'm working with families with college-bound kids. And where this comes from, it's the corollary to academic and social fit. So when your kid is starting to look at colleges, and if they have like a admissions counselor who's helping them build out their college list and find a good fit and that kind of stuff, typically you would have, say you're applying to 15 schools, 12 to 15 schools. A third of those schools should be reach schools. A third should be kind of target schools, and a third should be safety schools, right? That way maybe you'll get in, but you're going to get in some. And how they determine that is sort of how your grades and test scores match up with the current student body. So a reach school, you're in the bottom quartile of applicants. A safety school, you're in the top quartile, and a target school, you're right in the middle. So that does two things on the admission side. One is it gives you a good sense if you're going to get admitted or not, what your chances are, but also it's going to give you a good sense of how you fit in terms of student body, right? Are you going to be a big fish in a little pond or a little fish in a big pond? So admissions counselors use fit a lot in their guidance when they guide students through building a college list. So I started doing financial fit, sort of stealing that sort of model. But for me, financial fit is every school has a different kind of, just like every school has a different student body and selectivity rate and all that kind of stuff. Every school has a different financial aid model and financing system or approach. And so certain types of financial aid models are better fits for some families than others. So I built out these four types of students. And then based on what type of student you are, you can get a good financial fit school or a bad financial fit school. So it's a good fit for you or a bad fit for you. So, and the two variables are your grades and test scores, your stats, and then your financial situation. So if you're a high grades, high stats kid, you got super high grades and, 36 ACT, you're super smart, super hardworking, and your family is wealthy. You definitely want to avoid the IVs. That's a bad financial fit. And here's why. The Ivy League financial aid model is they will give you a lot of financial aid if you're poor. They will give you no financial aid if you're not. Okay. Or even middle class these days. So I see this all, but they give zero scholarships, no merit-based aid whatsoever. So your kid can be 4.75 GPA and 6,000 SAT and started a venture capital backed online AI driven tech business that cured cancer, and you're going to get zero scholarships. They just don't do it. That's not their model. So I run into this all the time where our family would be like, I don't understand this. My kid has perfect scores, perfect grades, got into Dartmouth, and they offered us nothing. I'm full pay there. How can this be? I thought I'd get a full ride. It's like, well, no, that's the bad financial fit. Whereas if you are a super smart kid, super high grades, super test scores, and you're a low income families, you definitely should be targeting the Ivies or the Ivy Pluses, the Stanfords of the world, because they do such a good job with need-based financial aid for lower income families. If you can get in, you're going to go there for next to nothing. Whereas a place like UGA, we live in Georgia, a place like UGA or Georgia Tech, they're not going to give any need-based aid. So if you're lower income, they're not going to give you a lot of aid. So like if you're a high income, high stats family, you would want to target places like UGA and Georgia Tech, but not the Ivies. If you're a high stats, low income, you'd want to target the Ivies and not the big research, flagship school, universities in state. So just because of the financial aid models, like UGA will give scholarship money, but they're not going to give any much need-based aid for lower income families. So you get a little money from the Pell program and if, the Hope and the Zell, but, if you're a low grades, high income family, you're probably going to be full pay. You're not going to get any need-based aid or any merit-based aid. So you'd want to look at, probably in-state public universities if cost is a concern. If you cross the state line, if you live in Georgia and you're like, Mike, you have one of those kids like, I'm not going to UGA. I'm not going to Georgia Southern. All my friends go there. I'm going to Auburn or I'm going to Tennessee, right? If you cross the state line, you're basically going to pay double.
Kids talking like that. I know you have kids.
That's exactly how they talk.
Yeah.
All my friends are going there. I don't want to go there. So, but you'd pay double. They're just going to pay double because if you stay in state to a public state university, a portion of it's subsidized by the state. So, and if you're a low income family, you might want to look at public regionals or community colleges. They're affordable. They're accessible. You can get in, go to a community college for a year or two, get your grades up, and then transfer to a different school, something like that. So in other words, if cost is a concern, you want to make sure you're looking at schools where you're going to get the best value, the best deal, and avoid the schools where you won't.
And that's fabulous information. Do you think that most schools, in terms of financial aid, are either needs-based or merit-based, but not both?
Great question. So there are some that are both. And they're usually expensive, what I would call tier 2 privates. They're not Ivy or Ivy Plus, but they are like small liberal arts colleges, like College of Worcester, where I went in Ohio. They'll give you need-based aid and merit-based aid. Those kinds of schools actually are pretty good options for families who are in that type 1 and type 2 space where so it's somewhat selective to get in. But if you have need-based aid, they'll give you some of that. And if you have merit-based aid, they can give you some of that, or they can give you a little bit of both. So private liberal arts colleges tend to be the types of schools that give both.
Is that information on their website, on the school's website? Where do you find out what
good question.
What they have to offer?
Well, not to plug my own employer, but College Aid Pro I work, as a pro at College Aid Pro, and we have built, I think, the best software program for this, and it's free for families. So it's like TurboTax, but for financial aid projections. Yeah, and it's free. So if you have listeners who are interested, it's mycap.collegeaidpro.com. But you can go and set up a free account. What you do is, so let me back up, and then I'll get back to College Aid Pro. You can do this on every university financial aid website. They have, by law, they're required to have what's called a net price calculator. And you can go to the net price calculator and put in some basic information on your family, and it'll project out an estimate of how much you're likely to pay there, the true net cost. In other words, how much aid you're likely to get. The dirty little secret is they're not accurate. They're very inaccurate. So the company I work for, one of my outside business activities, we actually built an accurate one, and we built it for every college in the country. And we used all these different databases, not to get nerdy, but the IPEDS reports and actual financial aid award letters and all this kind of stuff. And so it makes it very convenient for families too, because you put in your information once, you can search 3,000 colleges if you want, and it'll tell you, here's how much aid you're likely to get, or here's how much their net cost is likely to be. It's just much more accurate and much more convenient. So if families are really wanting to shop smart for college, like this is our budget, this is how much we can afford, which of these schools will be in our budget, you could use a tool like College Aid Pro to estimate it.
Excellent. This is just a wealth of information. I want to thank you so much. And for our listeners, there will be a copy of the book cover at the end of the podcast. And I encourage you to reach out to this group. They know what they're doing, and they've got the goods. I think it's wonderful. Thank you so much for being guests. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This is a ton of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining me on Love and Money with Barbara Treadwell. I hope today's conversation gave you something to think about as you navigate your own financial and personal journey. You can also visit barbaratreadwell.com to learn more about my work and connect with me. See you on the next episode.
The views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of Barbara Treadwell, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities or services mentioned herein. Unless otherwise specified, show guests are not securities licensed or affiliated with Barbara Treadwell, LLC, or Osaic Wealth. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should only be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth Inc. Member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth.